So October 26th, the Guardians of the Galaxy game came out. For me, I was really shocked because this game was announced in the summer of this year. And all of a sudden, like 3-4 months later, the game is released as a AAA game, which was just a complete surprise because usually when you announce a game of this caliber, they don't come out for a couple of years. So knowing this game was coming out only a week before its release, I was shocked and I didn't really know what to think about it. Just in case people are still cautious and find themselves without this game about 2 weeks after its release, yes, it is made by Square Enix, who made that very bad Avengers game. But this game's really good. Like, it's really good. It is a complete 180 from what the Avengers game was. Different gameplay, graphics, storyline, everything. It is just completely different from what Square Enix tried to do with the Avengers. It is not a play as a service. It is not multiplayer. It's not a microtransaction game, which is what they tried to do with Avengers. This is completely different. And it's much better. So I want to just say right now that I miss story mode games. Story mode games are my thing. And don't get me wrong, I love multiplayer. Like, I'm getting Battlefield 2042 tonight. I got the 7-day early access. That's my type of multiplayer game. I love Apex Legends. I love multiplayer in general. It's fun to play with your friends. Just shoot the shit. But what happened to story mode games and why don't we get them as prominently anymore? Because all these battle royales are just filling up the market. It seemed like within the past 10 years, story mode games have gotten so short. It feels like story modes, you're lucky if they last anywhere from 6 to 8 hours. And we live in a generation where saying an 8-hour story mode for a game is good. And in my opinion, it's not anymore. Games need to be longer. Unless there's a game with tons of side missions and open world capacity where you can go and do what you want. Yeah, sure. Some games are going to take, 30, 40, 50 hours to beat. But if you do want to just focus on the story mode, yeah, you'll probably beat it within 4 to 8 hours. Something stupid like that. And this is what is so good about this Guardians game. Everything about it is just enjoyable. The length of the story, the characters, the story itself, the gameplay, the graphics. That's not to say this game doesn't have its faults, because it definitely does, and it will be something that they will focus on moving on into the next Guardians game, because I can only imagine they're going to make a 2. But still, for their first game, and a game that was literally announced 4 months before it actually dropped, they did a great job. So let me start with the story and the length of the story. First of all, if you don't want to know anything about this game because you still plan on playing it yourself, well, spoiler warning. So the game is essentially about this weird mystical energy called Magus that is stuck inside a quarantine zone. And the Guardians happen to be at this quarantine zone in the beginning of the game, and Magus gets free. As the game goes on, Magus is on this route of destruction, trying to destroy and swallow the entire galaxy, if not the universe. This game jumps back and forth between the Milky Way, Andromeda Galaxy, and another galaxy called New Andromeda, which I would only assume is another galaxy in general. You visit tons of worlds, you see tons of aliens. A lot of the scenery and planetary design is very pretty, and it almost makes you wish that it was an open world game so you could go off and just explore more. Now, I yapped off about how much I love long games. That's why I love games like Mass Effect and Dragon Age. I love role-playing games. And that had this. The Guardians have that. There is a role-playing aspect. You get to make decisions throughout the game as if you are Star-Lord. You get to respond back to your teammates with your own dialogue. There is that aspect to this game, and I think that's why it's just so much more enjoyable for me. Back to the story and the length of the story. You're in missions sometimes for about an hour, 2 hours. Really, if you wanted to, you could argue that the game is about 14, 15, maybe even 16 hours. You could almost say that every chapter is an hour long, which would make it 16 hours because it's 16 chapters. And even if a chapter was shorter than others, the next chapter would make up by doubling the previous chapter. So the game was really long, and I miss that. I love long games, and I love that they were capable of creating such a compelling story that made you think one thing, but then all of a sudden something else is happening. And once again, I don't want to get into details because I don't want to spoil it for anyone. It is definitely a story mode and a game you should experience for yourself. Now, let's actually talk about the Guardians of the Galaxy for a little bit here. I'm going to say this right now, and it's probably going to be an unpopular opinion. I like these Guardians more than the MCU Guardians. I think this video game just captures the Guardians a lot better than the MCU does. Now, I do understand that it is very hard to change characters like that. So there is still, of course, a lot of similarities between the two. Chris Pratt's Star-Lord and the Star-Lord in the game is pretty similar. I will say, though, that I think the Star-Lord in the game is a lot less jokey than Chris Pratt's, and I do honestly kind of like that. That's not to say that the Guardians of the Galaxy game doesn't have a funny Star-Lord, because he is funny, but not as much as Chris Pratt, and take that as you will. That can be a good thing and bad thing. Too much comedy isn't always the best. I mean, Groot, how do you screw up Groot? I am Groot. You can't really do anything to screw him up there. Drax is pretty much the same. There is not much difference about him. In the first half of the game, I was kind of like this on Drax. I was like, he's just there. It is what it is. But then in the last half of the game, I started realizing how much I actually liked his character. And you know what? I gotta say, it's very even between him and Dave Bautista. I think they're both pretty even for me. Then again, I do think that the MCU's Guardians tries a little too hard with the comedy sometimes, and it's misplaced and not needed. I thought it was perfect in this game, especially with Rocket. I think, once again, Rocket very similar to the MCU, but there's just something about Rocket that made me attached to him a lot more than the movies. And even in saying that, I do enjoy his presence in the movies too. In the game, the first 6 chapters, I couldn't stand Rocket. But as the game went on, I started to like him more and more and more. And I just feel they put a quality control on his humor in the game, whereas in the movies, some of the humor misses. Now, the biggest character is Gamora, because I really enjoy Gamora. And I'm going to tell you guys this right now. You all know, for who's been watching me, I am a DC fan over a Marvel fan. I know a lot of DC, and I know Marvel. I don't invest my time in it. I don't fully know the worlds. I am someone who knows a lot about Spider-Man, who knows a lot about the X-Men. But for example, I don't know a lot about Guardians, but I know them well enough to know how they would be in comic book form. And I just feel Gamora is so much more comic book accurate. I gotta be honest, she's the weakest point for me in the MCU, in the Guardians of the Galaxy movies. I'm not a huge fan of Zoe Saldana as Gamora. I mean, she's there, she's all right. I don't hate it, but I definitely don't love it. And I gotta say, I loved her in the Guardians game. So yes, it may have felt like I was going a little back and forth there with, I love it, I hate it, I love it, I hate it. It's not where I'm trying to go with it. I'm just trying to simply say that, yes, I do enjoy the MCU's Guardians of the Galaxy, but I feel like this video game captured them perfectly, and I loved it. Even to characters like Mantis and Adam Warlock were in the game, and I thought that their personas were captured very well. Taking it back to Gamora for a second there, and also mixing it with Mantis, In the films, yes, they have their moments. Yes, Mantis can be funny. Yes, Gamora in the films is cool. But in the video game, I just felt like you could connect with Gamora and Mantis so much more. And who is Star-Lord without his 1970s and 80s rock and pop music? And if you do like that, well, you're in luck, because in this game, they do feature that pretty heavily. Even in the downtime of the missions where you're walking around their ship, the Milano, talking to squad mates or inspecting things around the ship, there is an option to turn on the sound system in the Milano where you can listen to all that types of music. For example, you got New Kids on the Block Hanging Tough, or you got White Wedding by Billy Idol. There's even an ability in the game when you're fighting enemies that if you use it at the right time, it gives you music in the background coming from his cassette, which is really cool. Now let's talk about the gameplay actually. It's very simple and it's very easy to use. It's nothing too out of this world complicated. It's pretty much just point and shoot. You can jump around, you can dodge, you have certain abilities you can use, and that's pretty much it. What's interesting about this combat is how much it does remind me of a Mass Effect or a Dragon Age, where you can open up an ability wheel and you can choose what abilities you want your squad mates to use. All of the squad mates do attack on their own. They got their own weapons where they do their own thing in battle, but there is an ability wheel and each character has 4 abilities. That is where you can take use of these abilities and put them on a specific enemy on the battlefield that you would like them to use it on. And what makes it very cool is everyone's ability does complement one another. So for example, Rocket has this grenade that magnetically attracts everyone together, so they all get squished up into a ball. You could then send in Gamora, where she does an assassin strike and she bounces from one enemy to the other while slicing. While she does that, you could send in Drax and he could do this like cannonball jump where he jumps in the sky and crashes down and creates like a wave of friction where everyone gets damaged. While that's all happening, you could send out Groot to ensure that he puts roots in the ground and they're all trapped and they can't move. And then you, as Star-Lord, you can run in and he has this ability where he jumps up in the air and he shoots his guns on the ground and it creates elemental effects. Everyone's abilities can be used in unison together in many different variations and ways, and I really did enjoy that. Now, keeping along this gameplay thread, let's talk about the upgrades for a second. And this is actually one of the downfalls for me. I think the upgrading could have been a lot more in-depth. Pretty much all it is the more you fight enemies, the more you get XP. And because everyone has 4 abilities, there's 4 upgrades per person. The first power is only 1 ability point, and then the second power is 2 ability points, the third power is 3, and the fourth ability is actually only upgradable by playing the story, where your characters like Gamora and Drax, Rocket and Groot will eventually develop that 4th power on their own. So that's not an upgradable ability, that comes by just simply playing the story. With the lack of upgradable abilities, unfortunately, I would say you find yourself around chapter 10 without needing to upgrade anymore. So now it's like you don't really have anything to improve for your squad mates. And I think that the upgrades and the abilities should have been vast enough to the point where you actually have to play it in New Game Plus to continue to upgrade things. Which, unfortunately, we do have New Game Plus, but we won't have any abilities to upgrade when playing it again. Another one is perks. Those are more abilities you can upgrade, but only for Star-Lord, since you play as Star-Lord the entire game. And he's got some abilities like fire rate has increased, or if you dodge an enemy at the right time, you'll be able to counteract right after. Or his boots, his gliding boots, when he's flying in the air, he can stay in the air 50% longer. And there's only 15 perks that you can upgrade. And once again, I found myself maybe around chapter 10 or 11 completely upgrading all of those abilities. So now I didn't have anything else to upgrade anymore. And as the game was going along, those perks are upgraded by crafting metals that you find during missions. I still found myself trying to find those metals even though I knew I didn't have anything to upgrade anymore. And by the end of the game, I was left with a mass amount of crafting components that I could literally have used to upgrade another 15 perks. So in Guardians 2, which I can only assume they will make, I really do hope they put more depth onto abilities and upgrades. Now, I'm like a cosmetic hoe in games. I love cosmetics, guys. Cosmetics in video games are one of the coolest things out there. Even if I don't use a cosmetic, I just love the fact that they're there, and I love how much detail some games go into to create cosmetics. A prime example of superhero games that handles cosmetics perfectly is the Batman Arkham games and the Spider-Man games. They handle cosmetics on another level. So of course, Star-Lord in this game has the most cosmetic options. I'm pretty sure he has about 15 costumes. Everyone else on the team has about, I believe, 8 costumes, maybe 9. I will say I'm very 50-50 on the costumes. I think some of them are really, really cool, and I think some of them are just kind of like, like whatever. Like for example, Groot. I don't really think Groot has the best costumes. And I mean, how are you going to change Groot all that much? He's just a tree, unless he's actually wearing an outfit, which a couple of his costumes he actually is. But some of his costumes just differ in the sense where, like, one, he's got a mohawk, and the other, he's just got, like, curly branches. But then the other one, like, it's just a normal branch head. Like, it is what it is. It's Groot. Like I said, you can't change him much. There are others, though, like, for example, Rocket, where I think they put a lot of effort into some and not others. So some costumes were good, and some were kind of meh. But overall, everyone, this game was just a lot of fun. And I wasn't necessarily planning on making this a review video, but you know what? I'll give you my review for the game. I think this is an 8 out of 10. And I think this is a huge win for Square Enix, considering they're coming off of that Avengers game, which is really, really bad, and they needed a win. And nowadays, we're living in a world where superheroes don't just dominate the movie markets, they're now dominating video games. If it weren't for how successful the Batman Arkham games were, we might not have some of these games, and the Arkham games might have not influenced some of the traits some of these games have nowadays. This Guardians game is worth playing, it's worth playing a second time, and it is worth making a sequel to. And I gotta be honest, I've never been a huge Guardians fan. I think they're cool, I think they're a little entertaining, but that's as far as I'll go. Even though I'm a DC guy over a Marvel guy, I do have a little bit of a soft spot for the Guardians now. I kind of want to know a little bit more about them. That's something else this game did really well too. They'd make mentions of Thanos, him destroying worlds and trying to take over galaxies. There's even small Easter eggs, spoiler alert, to the Avengers and Spider-Man in this game. A little bit of deep-rooted world building was going on in this game, and I don't know where that would go in the future if they would tie these projects together, but I'm just saying, it's got me really excited, and I hope maybe for some DLCs, and if not DLCs, just a second game. But anyways, everyone, that is it for this video, and technically this game review, I guess we could call this. If you haven't tried Guardians of the Galaxy, I will tell you right now, go out, get it. I would even recommend buying it full price. It is worth it. If not, I'm sure eventually it'll get cheaper. Just wait for then. But no matter when you get it, it will be worth playing. But just like always, everyone, make sure to leave a like and to subscribe to the channel if you want to keep up to date with all my content. It really does help me out. And until next time, I will talk to you all very soon.